Hello, I'm Nat Moss, and this is the WCS Wild Audio Podcast, where you'll find reported audio stories covering the latest news and newsmakers from the Wildlife Conservation Society's field sites, zoos and aquarium, and their conservation partners. We've got a great show today, so let's get to it. Madidi National Park in northeastern Bolivia boasts a jaw-dropping concentration of some of the richest biodiversity on the planet. The vast landscape ranges from the Amazon River basin up nearly 6,000 meters to the peaks of the Andes. A comprehensive WCS survey has documented thousands of plants and animals, some new to science, that are informing conservation in the region. Hannah Kaplan recently checked in with WCS Bolivia's Rob Wallace to learn more.
We can probably say with some confidence that Madidi is the most biologically diverse protected area in the world, but there's still a lot to be done.
That's Rob Wallace, Senior Conservation Scientist for WCS Bolivia. Since a childhood spent exploring nature in England, Rob has always had a deep interest in wildlife and conservation, which ultimately led him to Bolivia after studying zoology. More than 20 years later, Rob has spent his career working to document one of the most diverse regions on the planet.
So for those reasons, it's very special, and it has, therefore, not only extraordinary biodiversity, it also has stronghold populations of many of Latin America's most charismatic wildlife, and it also has, of course, an extraordinary cultural diversity. It was hypothesized as being the most biologically diverse protected area in the world. But at that stage, of course, there wasn't very much information to actually be able to prove that.
So how do you prove that Madidi is one of the most important natural places on Earth, while also communicating its importance to people, even local Bolivians who weren't aware of this fact? Rob needed data from surveys and a team to do the job.
All of the scientists on it were Bolivian except me. We wanted it to have a Bolivian identity. I think that really helped it and its impact.
So Identidad Madidi, a comprehensive study of thousands of species of flora and fauna, was born. And what Rob and his team found was truly incredible.
We're talking about more than 5,000 species of plant confirmed within Madidi, and of which on the expedition, I think there were over 100 potential new species to science. Fish was a particularly interesting one. But, overall there are 333 fish species so far confirmed for Madidi, of which we think that 35 of them are candidates as new species for science.
As for Rob's favorite new species?
I really love the catfish. Lots of people don't like catfish because they say they're really ugly, but they're beautifully ugly. There's a banjo catfish and a bumblebee catfish. Both of those are really spectacular.
One of the most critical factors for the success of this project were the partnerships with local indigenous groups, many of which WCS has worked with for over 20 years.
Local people and local indigenous people in particular have been the biggest defenders of the protected area and conservation over the last quarter of a century.
Rob explains that not only does WCS's work benefit from indigenous knowledge, but in return, his team can provide the technical support that helps these groups manage resources sustainably for their own benefit.
So that might be things like chocolate, so there's wild cacao, but we also assist on wildlife management initiatives like, for example, the sustainable shearing of vicuña in the highlands.
So what's next for the team and the region? Rob says that one of the challenges is figuring out how to provide governments and indigenous peoples with the resources and technical skills to manage the landscape themselves. He also cites the importance of imparting on urban voters the value that these wild places hold, something that surveys like this can help communicate.
We've also expanded our approach in the last couple of years to include another incredible place in Bolivia called the Llanos de Mojos, which is the largest wetland in the Amazon basin. Beyond the wildlife and biodiversity of that place, it's also one of the most important places on the continent in terms of archaeology, and again has extraordinary cultural diversity too.
Rob acknowledges the challenges and threats to the natural world here, but he is also hopeful about the progress being made in Bolivia.
There are problems, there are threats, those threats are increasing. There are a lot more pressures on many of these areas, and particularly when we think about the Amazon basin, which was for many years largely untouched. But there's also been a lot of progress. So, 50% of the Amazon basin has been declared as either protected area or indigenous territory. We're seeing evidence of a growing interest in the environment. The environment is further up the political agenda than perhaps it was a quarter of a century ago in Bolivia.
Thanks to projects like Identidad Madidi, scientific research and public engagement converge to help reinforce the value that these landscapes hold. For WCS Wild Audio, I'm Hannah Kaplan.
Today's episode was produced and reported by Hannah Kaplan with help from Dan Rosen and Nat Moss. The WCS Wild Audio podcast is a production of the Wildlife Conservation Society. Please join us next week for a new episode, and don't forget to rate or review the show wherever you get your podcasts.